Good morning. It's Friday morning, and we're at the tail end of week 7. I want to take a few moments and go over with you the short stories listed for this week, A&P, The Ones Who Walk Away, and The Jewelry. To start with, the A&P, written by John Updike, was written during the 1960s. The setting is very important in this story because the 1960s, of course, the setting is everything that characters know or use, plus where and when the story sets. So the 1960s is significant in the story. The 1960s in America was a time of change and upheaval and free love and Woodstock and sex, drugs, rock and roll, and just a whole culture just evolving pretty much overnight. So when these three girls walk in wearing nothing but bathing suits, bikinis, into this small town traditional store, of course it causes quite the uproar. It's falls in the genre of a coming of age story, which means the main character just grows up. In real life, growing up is a series of events and decisions and consequences over several years. But of course, in literature, the author is going to condense that to just one specific time. And here's Sammy, 19 years old, and he's living at home. His mom irons his shirts and fixes lunches. His parents got him a job at the supermarket. And then when he makes the mistake there at the end, uh, all that's going to change. And Sammy feels it in his gut that life is going to be hard hereafter. Of course, you could debate whether it was a mistake or not, Sammy quitting his job. Because on one hand, yeah, he has given up a good job that his parents got for him, and his life's going to be hard after this. But maybe it was necessary for him to grow up, for him to become a mature, responsible adult. And so we also take a lot of look at the diction of the story, the level of slang, the conversational tone of the speech. Now, this is all first person, and most of it happens inside Sammy's head. We hear Sammy's thoughts. But yeah, if I were going to use a one of the literary criticisms for this story, definitely would be feminist theory, which holds that in literature, women have been minimized, marginalized, and ignored. In our story, we have three women, but they're only there as sex objects. They're only there to get Sammy's attention, and well, and all the men's attention as they walk through the store, and that's pretty much their only purpose in that story. So yeah, feminism would help very well. And if you want to discuss formalism, then either setting or diction, the style in which the story is written. You can even say the tone. Now, if we're talking about the tone, don't forget the tone of a story is the mood it creates. It's how it makes the reader feel. And while some kind of sort of serious stuff happens here, it's still lighthearted. It's still kind of upbeat. And on one hand, you feel a little sorry for Sammy because he's done a very immature thing, but he has finally grown up and he realizes it. That epiphany there at the end, the climax of the story is literally the last paragraph where he realizes, oh, the world's going to be hard after this. Yeah. Welcome to real life, kid. Let's do the jewelry next by Guy de Maupassant. Nice little short story. And you might look at it and you say, okay, what's the theme? What's the idea? Why does this story exist? Well, that's a good question. And I would say that it exists because it helps us to understand deconstruction. If you remember, the literary criticism, which we call deconstruction, is the most popular form of postmodernism, and it holds that yes, two people can read the same short story, read it carefully and read it well, and still have totally different opinions about it. We look at the story of the jewelry, and the only real question is, where did the jewelry come from? A lot of people want to say, well, she had a boyfriend who bought her all the jewelry. But the author goes to a lot of trouble the first third of the story to tell us what a sweet, kind, loyal, faithful person this is, what a good wife, how much she loves her husband, and how much he loves her. He paints her so perfectly that he then turns around and says, well, she does have two vices, though, and these are pretty innocent vices. She likes going to the theater, which was not cheap in those days. It was a big event. She enjoyed going to the theater, And she enjoyed collecting costume jewelry, fake jewelry, plastic jewelry, although it would have been in glass in those days. Then, her husband, Monsieur Lutin, becomes so destitute he can't even live on his own income. It is time out. It is interesting to note, if you want to jump back just a page, that he says that with her managing the household, with her managing the expenses, he feels like he makes much more money than he actually does. He feels like they're living pretty well. And then when she dies, he's not living near as well. In fact, for some reason, he can't even afford to feed himself. He feels like he's fixing to starve to death. That's why he takes the necklace out and pawns it, finds out that it wasn't costume, it wasn't fake jewelry worth $4 or $5. It was real jewelry worth $18,000. And then, of course, his greed takes hold and he sells all of it and brings in something a little bit less than $300,000. He tells his coworkers he's got $300,000. He tells somebody later on he's got $400,000. So it's like catching a fish, where the story just gets bigger every time. If you ask me to explain that last paragraph, I really can't. The paragraph simply says he met a new woman who was a very mean woman, and she made his life miserable after that. Is that what he deserved to get? I don't know. But yeah, the deconstruction, the fact that two different people can say, well, she had a boyfriend who bought her all this expensive jewelry, or no, maybe she only pretended to be poor early on and she really had this expensive jewelry purchased already, or maybe she was a cat burglar and she robbed all of her rich friends, or maybe the same rich friends who bought her the theater tickets, which weren't cheap, they're buying her good seats on opening night. Maybe these same friends also gave her or loaned her the use of some of their extra jewelry. There are several explanations possible, although each one seems less likely than the previous. But it just shows you that, yeah, 2 or 3 or 4 people can read the same story, come out with different interpretations, and everybody's correct. Ah, the wonders of literature. All right, let's talk about the ones who walk away from Omelas. The author goes to a lot of trouble to establish this fictional city of Omelas, which is ideal. It's perfect. It is a utopia. The weather's perfect. The crops are perfect. Perfect health, perfect peace, perfect everything. And it takes place during the festival of summer with the horses and the braided hair and the little boy leading the parade. And everything is just idyllic and fantasized and perfect and just unimaginably good place to live, and everyone's happy. She does point out, and I think this is one of the themes of her story, she does point out that they are simple people, but not a stupid people. The people who live in Omelas, they're simple in their ways. They are an agrarian society. They're not a technological society, but they're simple, but they are happy. And so I guess she's, in one sense, one thing she's trying to say with the story, Ursula K. Le Guin, is that you don't have to be rich or prosperous or high tech or fancy in order to be happy. But then, of course, as the children grow up in this wonderful city, they are taken one or two at a time down to the basement of either the large government building or a rich person's house. It says it could be either one. And there they find the small child who is being tortured kept in a broom closet, a mop closet. I'm sorry, mops smell much worse than brooms. The kid is badly malnourished. I mean, malnourished to the point of extreme torture. No one can say a nice word to him. If you talk to him at all you can do is call him names and yell at him, kick him, hit him. And he lives covered in his own feces. He can't speak because no one has spoken enough to him. His life is intolerably miserable. But everyone who lives in Omelas knows that it's because of this one child that everyone else has a pretty much perfect life. And without the child, no one would. Most of the people there come to grips with that. They come to accept that and go on and live their idyllic, happy lives. But there are a few who cannot accept it, and they're the ones who walk away from Omelas. Now, the question becomes, if they walk away from this utopian society, where are they walking to? Well, we're assuming that they're walking out into the real world, places like Lubbock, Texas, which is not perfect, not idyllic. Certainly don't have perfect weather or perfect crops or perfect anything else. And we certainly have more than just one small child kept in a closet. Crime, violence, harshness, meanness are rampant in every city in America. And the first conclusion I came to is that these people who leave Omelas come to other places like Lubbock where they can help. In Omelas, they can't help the suffering boy, but in other places of the world, they can help, even though it might be just a small bit of help, maybe feed one hungry person, maybe encourage one despondent person. But they feel like they'd rather live an imperfect life, being able to help others, than not. So those are our short stories for week 7. I hope you enjoyed them. We got 2 for next week. Week 8, we're doing A Jury of Her Peers and The Yellow Wallpaper. The Yellow Wallpaper is about insanity, as you're going to see. Be sure that you know what postpartum depression is. Spoiler alert. A Jury of Her Peers. You need to know a little something about the American judicial system. In our country, we have a constitution which guarantees us a trial by jury of our peers. Now, the word peers can have a large meaning, but in this story, the author is saying her peers are the people who are just like her. People who live in the same place, who've done the same work, they're housewives, they have strong husbands, they're the only ones qualified to judge her, and they do judge her, and they find her not guilty. Well, I wouldn't say they find her not guilty. I would say they find her not deserving of going to trial. They discover the means, the motivation that the men are looking for, and they hide it, which means that they don't think she should go to trial for what she did based on the circumstances. But consider the setting there, and on the Yellow Wallpaper, consider the setting as well. The setting of the Yellow Wallpaper was it 1910, I think, said 120 years ago. And the man in the story loves his wife, really loves her, and really, really, really wants to do everything he can to help her. And he is a doctor, and her brother's a doctor, and they both agree that the best way to treat her is the way in which she receives treatment, and it only makes matters worse. So yeah, and no, the baby doesn't die. Don't be saying, oh, the baby's dead. No, the baby's not dead. Now the husband does die in the story. The story never says that explicitly, but if you read it carefully, she's got the rope up in her room. He finally finds a way to get into her room. She says he fainted, and she has to creep over him. She has to step over him every time she goes around the room, but no, he did. All right, so good stories for next week. Of course, you've got your outline, which is due Sunday, March the 1st. Please make sure that your outline looks very, very similar to the sample provided. Let's see, like that. Yeah, okay. With the heading and the title and the thesis. Be sure all sentences are complete sentences. All sentences have a period. You don't need a works cited page, but you do need 2 quotes from the short story and 1 quote from your secondary source. So, and that's all the sources you need. The assignment sheet is a little bit confusing because it says you need 2 sources, and you do, but I've given you 1. I've given you the primary source. So all you need to do is find 1 secondary source that talks either about the story or about the rhetorical mode, the vocabulary word that you're going to use to interpret the story. Think of it this way. Pretend like you're an expert on the lottery, and you're teaching an English class, and a student asks, can you explain the use of setting in the lottery, or the use of irony in the lottery, or the use of foreshadowing? And so then you explain what the examples of it in the story and how it helps the reader understand the story better. You quote from the story or from the secondary source, and then just explain that, explain how it helps the reader understand the story better. Okay, that'll be in the final draft, of course. The rough draft, the outline is just, what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 sentences. No, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 sentences, because you've got thesis, topic sentences, and then 3 quotes. So yeah, it's 7 sentences. And it does need to be formatted. It needs to look like this with the same font and the same Roman numerals and all that kind of nice stuff. But I'm sure you'll do well on that. Okay, I do encourage you. I know we talked about this in class last week, but before you submit, go back and read the story again. Make sure you've got a great understanding of the story. Make sure that you really understand it. Look up all the words you don't know. There shouldn't be very many, but look up the words you don't know. Make sure you understand the story, because you really want to avoid those errors of fact, those little factual errors. It just shows a lack of understanding of the story, and that would have a bad effect on your grades. So, all right, y'all have yourselves a good weekend, and I look forward to seeing you next week.